I heard you.
Just so you know, you're right.
Give me a second. Would you give me a second? Well, hello there. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day it is that you happen to be listening. Welcome back to the Laugh and Learn podcast with America's funniest handyman and friends. Today on the Laugh and Learn podcast, we're going to be talking about framing techniques. And why would you want to listen to a finish carpenter talk about framing? Well, that's because most finish carpenters really understand how poorly framing can be done if they don't take the end result into account when they're doing their stuff. So today, we're going to be going over some really cool stuff for people that want to learn some basic framing techniques that they want to do around the house. Now, if you are planning to do an addition to your home, this is not the podcast for you. If you want to listen to this podcast to learn about framing techniques, I'm assuming that you're probably going to be tackling smaller projects like either adding or removing a wall in one of the spaces in your home, or maybe you're framing to add some new cabinets. Perhaps you are making a new opening in one of the walls in your house or the exterior of your home so that you can add a new window or a new door. So today we are going to be focusing on smaller projects. And when I say we, I'm talking about me and my friend Andon over here.
Hey, how you doing?
Say hi, Andon.
Hi, Andon.
If you did not listen to my first episode, I recommend that you shut off the podcast right now and go back and listen to the first episode so that you understand how highly qualified this man is to not only be here on the podcast, but to be here talking with me about framing techniques. Andon Heinberg has a business in the Philadelphia area called Keystone Handyman Solutions. He's based in Collegeville, and he really knows his stuff. We've worked together as colleagues for a couple of decades now, and we are a couple of carpenter nerds who just geek out on this stuff all the time. So today we are going to be covering the different applications of framing, what framing is, what it is and what it's used for, some of the different types of techniques that are used in order to construct framing structures. We're going to be going over some of the basics, just the real basics of how to move all the way from planning to completion for your framing projects. And of course, as you can see, we'll be talking about some of the helpful tools that you'll need in order to make it happen. So, yeah, that's it for the introduction, right?
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Framing, an important part of carpentry.
Yes.
Carpentry is the category, framing is the subcategory, and we're going to probably get into the woods a little bit here.
That's well, no pun intended, right? We're getting into the woods. But yeah, I think a lot of times we would, and you'd agree with me on this, that framing is often underrated by finish carpenters.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all the trades, doesn't matter what trade you're in, you're always talking about the other trades or the other guys that came before you and did their thing. Finishers, we're at the very end. We're the closers. We come in, so we see everything that happened.
Yeah, we make our job as finish carpenters. I mean, I'm a handyman, Andon's a handyman, but honestly, both of us really specialize in finishing techniques when it comes to plumbing, electrical, and carpentry. We are making everything look pretty, look nice.
Yeah.
Making everything finished at the end.
A great outcome, regardless of what it could be your shed, and it could be inside your house with crown molding and wainscot and like all this different stuff. There's so many different things, but as carpenters, as finished carpenters, like we're making the best outcome.
Yeah. When I have a customer that is wondering, like, I a lot of times I will have to educate my customers once I get started, or I'm planning a let's say a wainscoting project.
Yeah.
If we're doing wainscoting, Andon and I did a wainscoting project together a few months ago, and sometimes you have to tell your customer, hey, there are some extra things that I'm going to need to do because whoever framed this house originally did a very so-so job.
Yeah. Or
Right?
or you find something settled, so there's some discrepancies. Everybody needs to know right off the bat, there is no such thing as 90 degrees in your house.
Unless, of course, it's built by a finished carpenter
Right, yeah.
from the beginning.
No, like your walls, you look at your walls and they're finished in such a way that they look correct at 90 degrees. But if you actually took one of these guys, this is called a carpenter square, you'd find out that it's not actually perfect.
And that's typically not the fault of a framer or anything. That's
No,
because
that's
of the
just-
buildup of mud
Yeah, all sorts of...
in the corner to make it look nice.
Right.
It looks real pretty. There's got to be like a slight buildup of mud.
Yeah.
So let's get into let's start right off with some of the tools.
Yeah, some of the tools.
What's one of your favorite framing tools?
One of my favorite framing tools is the carpenter square. I'll just pull this little guy up here. This is a small version. It's 12 inches long. It's a 90-degree square. It's important for framing, trying to figure out and understand how to use a carpenter square is huge. This is...
But what's the difference between that and this one, Andy?
Okay, that's called a speed square.
Uh-huh.
A speed square is a lot of time used. I'll hold that. A lot of time used. You throw it on a board like this, bam, and you can make a straight line wherever you put it. You know, you can move it up and down. Let's say this is a 2x4. So they call it a speed square because it's a quick 90 degrees. It's speed. It's got a little hook on it. You throw it on there, boom. There's so many more things that this can do, but
Yeah,
if you're doing framing,
just a for instance, we're not going to get in. This is a whole nother podcast episode. But if you were to take a very good look at this, you would see that there's a lot of little numbers here, and a lot of those little numbers help you take into regard different types of pitches for roofs. But these numbers can also come in handy if you have different angles in a room that need to be accounted for. You can make little reference marks on the square to help you with angles. But like I said, we're not going to get into that. I would say
it's a measuring tool.
90% of the time we're using a speed square in order, like Andon said, to make a straight 90-degree line on a framing board so that we can cut it properly with a circular saw. There's a few things that are not on the table right now. We don't have a hammer. We don't have a nail puller. We don't have a circular saw or a chop saw. I'm assuming that if you're checking in for basic framing techniques and you want to brush up on your framing, that you already know what those tools are.
Yeah. There's here's a good one. A Sawzall is not a framing tool.
A Sawzall
It's
is not.
kind of like a demo tool.
Sawzall is basically a demo tool.
Yeah, when you're cutting stuff out, when things need to be pulled or taken apart, it's more like a demo. So when I think of a Sawzall, I don't think, that's going to come out when I'm framing.
I've used a Sawzall very often to remove somebody else's poor framing.
Yes.
One of my favorite tools for framing is the laser leveler.
Yeah.
Love the laser leveler, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm old enough that I was framing before the laser leveler was a common thing on job sites. I was a young carpenter in my 20s when we first started to see laser levelers. And before the laser level came out, the chalk line was a lot more prevalent. We don't have a chalk line on the table. But in order to make sure that things were level for spans, large spans of 20, 30, 40 feet and going around an entire perimeter of a house. Before the laser leveler came into existence, you had to just do a lot of chalk lines and a lot of reference marks, and there was a lot more pencil marks on things that needed to be. Nowadays, you can just set up your laser at a certain point in the room, and boom, it's done. But as you can see, Andon's also got a plumb bob that he's using on his square. And if I was to move my laser leveler over like this.
This is the old way. That's the new way.
So hold it in one place, Andon, so that people can see that the plumb bob helped. Just shake, give it a little shake. Yeah, there we go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can see that a plumb bob helps things, because plumb bob helps things become plumb. Now, let's just talk for a real quick second about the difference between level.
That's a good one. And plumb.
Difference between level
or plumb.
And plumb. And that's all it is. One is horizontal and one is vertical. And I did a video. On putting in.
I don't know why I love plumb bobs.
I did a video on doing balustrades. Installing newel posts and balustrades a couple of months ago. And when I went back and looked at the video, I kept saying level when I meant plumb.
Yeah.
And I felt like an idiot, but I still do it sometimes. Like, carpenters know what they're talking about. Like, oh, that board needs to be level, and somebody will shout out, no, it's plumb, you idiot. You know, something like that. But that's the difference between this is plumb and this is level, and that's all you need to know. And that's what a laser leveler helps you do. That's why you see the crosshairs, because one is level and one is plumb, and that's all. But the laser leveler will save you a ton of time. Yeah. But you also still want to have a regular old level. This is one of my favorite levels because it's adjustable. Right now it's a 2-foot level, but it also becomes a 4-foot level. And the longer, if you're framing with 8-foot boards, 9-foot boards, typically there's going to be discrepancies in those boards. So you don't want to use a real short level to check and see if a long board is plumb. True, yeah. You want to use a longer level because you want to make sure to account for the slight curves and discrepancies in that board. And something like this can come in handy, but if I'm framing a whole, like quite a few different walls, I'm probably going to have a 6-foot level out in order to make sure that my verticals are nice. Yeah. And why is it important that all the boards go in nice and plumb?
So I got a quick story from when I was young. I hadn't any real idea how carpentry was. I was learning. I got one of my first jobs. I got hired by a construction guy. This is out in Northern California in the Chico Hills. And his name was William Kirby, Bill Kirby. He's one of the best carpenters. Like, I still think he's one of the best carpenters I ever saw. Uh-huh. He could do some things with no strings, lines, anything, with a worm drive saw. He didn't make measurements, and he would just run up and make some huge cuts long on plywood, on roofs and things. And then we would go back later and measure and be like, he did it perfect. And we'd all look around at each other like, what? Well, that's why he's the boss.
I spoke to a guy like that on the phone this weekend. I forgot to mention in the introduction that in every podcast episode, at some point in the episode, we are going to listen to one of my prank calls to either a contractor or a lumber yard. And Saturday, I had a quick conversation with a contractor. Okay. And so we are going to listen to that. We are going to listen to that prank call in a little bit. But one of the key tools that isn't right here on the table, that is literally, I always say, one of the most important tools that you can have in your toolbox at any given time is patience. And not everybody has the same amount of patience.
Some people don't have any.
Some people don't have any patience. And we've all worked with guys or girls that have zero patience. And if you're lacking in patience or you want more patience, you want to listen up right now and listen to a word from our sponsor today, Johnson's Big Boy Patience in a Can. What do you reach for when the job gets tough? When things just aren't coming together? Have you ever kicked a toolbox or punched an apprentice in the face? Of course you have. But these types of reactions are juvenile and can lead to injuries and lawsuits, don't you know? It's time to put away those childish behaviors and reach for the product that's totally revolutionizing the entire construction industry. That's right, Johnson's Big Boy Patience in a Can. Dr. Safety here, and I didn't get to be the #1 name in job site safety for nothing. And I'm here to tell you that a lack of patience on the job site can be dangerous, leading to poor productivity, damaged building materials, and worst of all, hurt feelings. So the next time you feel your blood boiling and you can feel the pressure building inside your cranium and you know that you're just about to blow, stop, put down your tools, walk over to the job box and get yourself a big old helping of Johnson's Big Boy Patience in a Can. Johnson's Big Boy Patience gives you just what you need to finish that installation calmly, efficiently, and without all the drama. Big Boy Patience is made from old world peace and new age technology. Johnson's Big Boy Patience allows you to grow up, evolve, and stop acting like a total asshole. So the next time the job is on the line and you want to be the better man, reach for Johnson's Big Boy Patience in a Can. Johnson's Big Boy is a registered trademark of America's Funniest Handyman. America's Funniest Handyman. Come for the knowledge, stay for the laughs. Okay, well, that was great.
Awesome. Love that.
Have you tried Johnson's Big Boy Patience in a Can
I've
yet?
tried it. It's great stuff.
Yeah,
yeah. It really helps. Everything work out in the end. You know.
So anyway, we were talking about what were we were talking about. I was talking about the level.
We were getting.
What did I ask you?
I was going to tell you a story for Bill Kirby out in the Chico Hills.
And this somehow relates to the question that I asked you about why you want your vertical studs to be plumb.
Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, because let's say I've got 10 different vertical studs in one wall. Yeah. Why does it matter that they're plumb?
Well, yes. So
I mean, what if they're a little bit crooked? Why does that matter?
Well, it matters for several different reasons. First, Bill told me I'm 19. I'm working. I'm learning carpentry. I've got my own tool belt now. I've got my own hammer. I've got my own speed square. I have a cat's paw, and I have all the main like little hand tools. When you first come with carpentry,
I got tools.
You show up to work at 6:30 in the morning, and he says, "Where's your tool belt? Did you get the tools I told you to get?" And you pop your tools in, and you have no idea how to use them. Anyway, she said, "I'll tell you something that'll help you because we're framing a garage." She says, "The word is splef." And he said, "Splef. Remember that word." And
did he come up with this, or did you and I come up with this?
No. He said that word. He did. I think we added the P.
Yeah.
But splef, he said, everything needs to be square, plumb, level, even, and flush. Remember that.
Square, plumb, level, even, and flush. Splef. Not to be confused with spleef, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want helicopters flying over your backyard.
Spleefs aren't even illegal anymore, man.
Not California.
But anyway, spleefs have no place on a carpentry job site. They make you forget numbers.
Yeah,
they make you burn an inch, right? Oh, there's another story.
That's a good one.
So
we'll
get to that right now. We'll talk about that right now.
Burn an inch.
I'm burning an inch. Okay, so
And first of all, so everybody knows, there's only a certain amount of lumber on a job site. And if you're doing finished carpentry, that lumber is extremely expensive. And it is calculated down to very little bits of leftover.
Yeah, if there's a pile of 10 boards, you need all 10 boards. And so Andon and I, this is 15 years ago, we were on a job. Andon was an apprentice. And we had another guy on the job named Bruce.
And he thought I was a professional pool player.
Well, anyway. Bruce had a race car
lunchbox.
He had a race car lunchbox. And he just made Bruce made a lot of mistakes. And one of the mistakes that Bruce just made over and over was that if you're cutting trim and it's got like a 45-degree angle on either side because it's going on the top of a
like this right here. Yeah.
So sometimes you want to measure the short point on the 45 and so it's hard to use this first part of the tape, which is a little bit, it's got some play in it for a reason, which we won't even get into right now, but there's a little bit of free play in the end of the tape measure. And so some guys, when they're measuring certain pieces of lumber that are difficult to measure, they will start with the 1 and
not the 0.
And then they will end up having to and then you
have to add it in at the back.
You have to add it in at the end.
So let's say it's 30 inches.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we start at the 1, then now it's actually 29, and I have to add an inch to make it to 30. So this guy constantly, always was like, hey, I'm going to burn an inch on this. I'm going to burn an inch. And I'm going to burn an inch on the measurement. And I cannot tell you how many times he would be cutting for somebody, and he would bring you the board, and the board was an inch short.
And guess what? Board after board after board started disappearing off the pile.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon it's like, it's not good. Someone's going to have to tell the boss pretty soon.
We joke a lot about our memories of Bruce burning an inch and then forgetting to add it back in.
There are some good, fun tricks and techniques and jigs and things, but
that's a good. I like that acronym SPLEF. Square, plumb, level, even, and flush, and that means that your boards come together flush without any lips hanging over.
Yeah,
everything's even.
Right.
We all know what even means.
Right.
Level means
we just did that vertical.
Yeah, it means that
and horizontal.
Yep.
Plumb is vertical. Level is horizontal. And everything's talking about. We're always talking about a plane.
And I just want to say though that SPLEF is not a hard and fast rule. If you are in a new construction situation where you're, like let's say you're closing in a back porch or something like that, a lot of times, you want that top to be perfectly level. You want your corners to be perfectly plumb. But let's say you're doing something like Andon and I do, and you're working in an 80-year-old Philly row home, and there's nothing in the row home itself that is plumb or level because it's 80 years old and things have moved, you know? Then if you make all of your new stuff plumb and level, it will often look goofy.
Next to the old stuff.
Yes, next to the old stuff. It's your new stuff.
It'll stand out so much it'll look wrong.
Exactly. So we do what we call cheating a lot, which is, like...
It's not really cheating, just so you know. It's kind of like finesse.
Well, it's like saying that I've got a wall that's crooked. If I've got a wall that's crooked like this, and I've got a board that needs to go next to it for a doorway or whatever I'm putting up against it, if I make this one perfectly plumb, and this is a board that is visual or you can see it, what I will do is sometimes I will just cheat the bottom over. We say cheat it over a little bit just to kind of make things even out. And
happened to me a week and a half ago. top of the stairs, looking down on the TV room to the man of the house, his chair, which looks right up to where I was working. Mm-hmm. The baluster, I made it perfectly level. And then I went and stood where he would be looking at it every day for the rest of his life. And the floor was out. And it looked like this.
Yeah, it looked crooked.
Big old, like, you know. So I asked him, I said, look, floor's out a little bit. Would you like me to follow the floor so it looks correct aesthetically and it doesn't cause you? Some people, that's a big deal for some people.
Yeah.
So you got to you ask the customer, do you want this perfectly level? And I'm fine with that. Or would you like it to look, so as you look at it all the time, you don't think something's wrong? Because your eye will pick it up and your brain will pick it up. And you'll think something's wrong. You won't be able to tell what it is. A good carpenter will tell you immediately. But the floor's out a little bit. So, yeah, we ran it with the floor a little bit. Mm-hmm. Wasn't out of level, but it wasn't perfectly in level.
Yeah, same thing happens. I do a lot of front doors, a lot of entry doors in old homes. And it's a brand new, beautiful door, and I want to make everything as straight as possible. And especially if it's a pre-hung situation, everything pretty much does have to be square and plumb, but I'm going to have a conversation with the customer about, okay, I'm going to have to make some allowances here. I'm going to have to make some allowances there. In our situation, we will usually have a conversation with the customer and let them know what's going on before we send everything home with screws and nails. If you are at home doing this, you're probably going to want to let your wife know. And if you're a female watching this and learning from America's Funniest Handyman, then you might want to let your husband know so that your spouse or your significant other doesn't come to you afterwards and go, well, that looks like hell, you know? And the only reason I say for your wife is just because of demographics. I know that 90% of my viewing audience is male. That's right. That's it. So your spouse or significant other, you're going to want to let them know. So we got
measuring, cutting, and procedure.
We got our tools. We got splef. Now we want to talk about some of our basic techniques. And the first thing that you want to take into account before you do any cutting or measuring is what?
Layout.
Yeah. Planning
ahead and figuring out first of all, what am I trying to do? Why am I doing this? You know, and listen, write it down. I can tell you how, I got little books. You buy them at CVS for like this big. They cost $5. Mm-hmm. They can fit in your pocket. You take notes. I don't know. I've been doing it since I was young. Like somebody told me, just take notes because then you can go home and you can think about what you did all day and you can remember what you learned instead of just thinking that your mind's a steel trap.
I'm always drawing. I don't write in books as much as I draw things on
pieces of wood.
I'll draw on the back of a piece of wood, but before
draw it out.
Well, if you're framing for a kitchen, if you're framing a kitchen wall, and you're preparing for cabinets, you need to think 4 or 5 or 6 steps ahead,
right?
Because where that wall sits has a lot to do with where the cabinets end up. You got to think about, okay, I'm frame the wall, but then what goes on the wall afterwards? Okay, is there sheetrock going on the wall? Is there plywood going on the wall? If there is plywood or sheetrock, is it a 1/2 inch? Is it 5/8? Is it 3/8? Is there going to be tile added to that? Is there going to be another finish on top of that? Is there going to be some? You always have to take into account every single thing that comes after the framing.
Yes.
And before the cabinet gets put up, so that you don't just slam the wall down and then find out a week later, these cabinets.
It's out your Sawzall.
Yeah. Well,
the frame, the skeleton.
Especially if you're doing if the cabinets fit into a horseshoe.
Yeah.
You know, that's a much bigger deal than if you're dealing with an L-shaped cabinet configuration.
Right.
Where there's a little bit of room for error, but most of the time there's no room for error. By the time those cabinets come in, they need to end at an exact certain spot. So you need to take a lot of measurements. And this is why the old adage is An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Measure twice, cut once.
Drill the hole and fill the hole. Put the thingy in the hole. Be sure you're having fun. Measure twice, cut once.
But
measure more.
when things are super expensive, like a whole set of kitchen cabinets,
Yeah.
my theory is measure 20 times and cut once.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if a whole set of cabinets costs, $20,000, or a brand new entry door that I'm installing costs $4,000, I'm probably going to take a bunch of extra measurements and extra steps in the planning process so that once I get rolling, I know everything's right.
Yep.
I don't want to be worried thinking about, I wonder if I did that right. Like after I get
that's
rolling.
bad. That's all bad news because that's when your patience comes in handy.
I think this is where a lot of newbie do-it-yourselfers and homeowners.
It's okay to make mistakes.
I think this is where they get themselves into trouble.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of do-it-yourselfers that are in the beginning stages of learning to do it yourself want to go faster than some idea in their head. They just have an idea that they want to go quicker or it needs to get done. Like, I don't know why that is, but people put arbitrary deadlines in their head. Like, I got to get this done in a week, or I should get it done in 4 days or whatever. And then they skip over some of these important things like this beginning planning process, which is not something you should skimp on.
Yeah, when you're practicing anything, even if you're teaching a child how to do something, it's always a very calm and repetition. Very slow.
If you're a good teacher.
If you're a good teacher, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you are training your mind and your hands and your fingers. So carpentry is that. You're training yourself correctly. And I'll tell you one thing. Bruce, Burning Inch Bruce, taught me a layout trick when we were on the job years ago. And it stuck in my head so bad. It took me about 2.5 to 3 years to get it out. And every time I did a layout, because it soaked in right then and was wrong.
Yeah, and you were an apprentice.
I was. So everything that someone over the top of me told, it went in the book, and I was doing it, but it was wrong. So every time, I'm telling you, laid out a couple rooms and a couple runs of studs, and every time I'd think, Bruce, dang it, man, because the way he told me how to start was incorrect. Yeah. And so I would always, you're supposed to 16 on center. If you don't know what that is, that's every 16 inches on the center of the stud is where the stud goes.
From the center of the stud to the next center of the next stud to the center of the next stud.
It's a code thing for drywall. If inspectors come in, they're looking for 16 on center, how things are nailed off. And it has to do with just how framing is done.
Well, 3 sets of 16 is 4 feet. And 4 feet wide is a piece of sheetrock. You know? Yeah.
Well, you got to learn it right. You got to train yourself to do it slow till you get the hang of it, and then you can go faster.
Yeah, it's secondhand. You don't have to. For us now, we don't think about that stuff.
But when you're learning, do it slower and be patient, because if you learn it wrong,
I cannot emphasize enough that the planning and layout is the most important part of the framing process.
Yeah.
Then you can start measuring.
Yep.
And now we can talk about why this has a little free play in the end of the tape measure.
Right.
And it's actually pretty basic, but if you don't know, you don't know. And the reason is, so when I have a stud and I'm measuring from the end and I pull it. Whoop. If I'm measuring from the end of a stud and I pull on the tape, and then I bring that stud over to a wall, and now I'm pushing up against it, the amount of free play in the end of the tape measure is exactly the width of this little piece of metal on the end. It's the exact same width. So that whether I'm pushing or whether I'm pulling, my measurement always comes out the same. And that means that, you know, a tape measure has a life for accuracy, that is. Like, you can use a tape measure for as long as you want to use a tape measure, but if you want things to be really accurate down to a 16th or 32nd of an inch, then there will come a point where there's just too much
throw
free
it out.
play in this piece.
And if it ever rips,
and
just throw it out.
And if you want to, like, every time you want to be done with your tape and you go like this,
let it snap.
That's going to wear out that little piece on the end. So that's one.
And I'll say one more thing, since we're on tape measures. If you're working on a job where there are 3 carpenters or more, and you're all working around the same area,
I know what you're going to say.
You need to measure. You need to all pull your tapes out.
All right, boys.
6 feet.
Pull them out. It sounds so dirty.
Oh my God, that's
All
so
the carpenters
filthy.
need to gather up, and they need to get their tape measures out, and they need to compare them with each other.
You need to measure an inch. You all need to mark it and measure a foot, at least 3 measurements, and you all have to compare your tapes, because I guarantee you, you're not going to want to work on a job with 3 other guys, because there could be 3 different measurements. There could be a guy measuring your studs, cutting studs. His tape's, it's off by 1/8. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. It's just framing. But the other guy's is off in a different way, and he's doing some other things. So it's better to standardize and make sure everybody's tape. And if someone's tape is it should have been thrown out like a while ago, it's okay to make fun of them. Tell them to throw it out. Get rid of that thing, dude. Like, and if there's ever a rip in your tape, like what I'm saying is, like, if it breaks, so it's a sharp edge that could like run back and cut your finger, just get rid of it. It's not worth going to the hospital.
Another thing I want to show people is that when you're making marks on a piece of wood, you don't want to use a line to make a mark on a piece of wood,
Right.
to show where you need to draw your line, because anytime you draw a straight line like that, that line is not going to be straight, and you don't know which part of the line
Right.
is accurate. So in basic carpentry, we always make a V.
Yep.
And the point on the V is the exact place where that measurement needs to start. And then I can go ahead, show you on the back of this. So I'll come along and I'll make my measurement and I'll draw my little V. And then I will come back with my speed square. If I'm using a circular saw, I'm going to come back with my speed square, and that is where I'm going to make my nice straight line to make my cut with my circular saw. Now, there are situations where you can get a chop saw set up and you can save yourself a little bit of extra time by cutting your lumber with a chop saw, which makes a perfect 90 every time and cuts angles. It just depends on how big the job is, how much room you have, how much of a job setup you want.
Yeah, so just a little quick recap. So we're talking about framing. There's carpenter squares, there's speed squares, there's levels and lasers and plumb bobs. And we talked about every being square, plumb, level, even, and flush. And then we talked about making a plan, doing a layout. We talked about measuring. We talked about cutting. And now I think we're supposed to talk about lumber selection.
The only thing I wanted to say about cutting was that whether you're using a circular saw or a chop saw, you always want to have a jigsaw handy, because there are going to be spots that you need little cutouts for.
Yeah.
That's all. Okay, so now what would you want to talk about?
So lumber selection.
Yes,
and
selecting lumber, framing lumber in particular.
There are millions of, I'll call them techniques, good quality techniques. Never, ever, ever grab a piece of lumber off a pile and assume that the end of it is already perfectly 90 degrees.
It's
The people that
rare.
mill the lumber, they don't care. They just want it to be 96 and almost 96 or 97, but it's crooked. So
The
always
ends of the boards are always a little off.
Yeah, so
they're
when you
never a perfect 90.
start a measurement, start with a board, you lay your square on, whether it's a carpenter square or a speed square, do a little line and cut it off flat, and then do your measurement.
We typically, a
Some
lot of
guys-
times, we'll call that flushing out a board.
There you go.
That just means that before I measure the board, I'm going to cut one end of it at a perfect 90.
Before
And
I
sometimes
measure.
I'm just cutting off a tiny sliver,
Yeah,
but
half
I'm
a
going to
blade.
make sure the end of the board is 90
Yep.
before I make my measurement to
sounds
cut
dumb,
the other end.
and
No, it
some
doesn't.
well-
Doesn't sound dumb at all.
Dang it. I'm telling you.
It sounds brilliant, and it sounds.
Some people, I don't need to do that. I can tell if it's 90 degrees or not just by looking at it. Well, I only
But
have-
even if it's
Just do
90
it.
degrees
It's a
one
good
way, it
idea.
might not be 90 degrees the other way.
yeah, one
It's
day
just
you're going to
good
mess it up.
practice.
You're going to spend some money and you're going to mess up a real nice board.
I have something to say
Okay.
about lumber selection.
Okay.
There are two ways. If you're doing smaller projects at your house or your friend's house, there are two ways to select framing lumber. One is way faster, and that is you just call a lumber store or go to the Home Depot website and order 20 2x4s
It's
or 20 2x6s or 25 2x3s. You
ever
can
heard
just
of-
order those.
you
That's
ever heard
fast,
of Russian
right?
roulette?
Yeah, exactly. That's fast.
Yeah.
Now that's fast.
Yeah.
But once all of those boards get on the job, I guarantee you the guy or girl that loaded that lumber
Most of the time.
doesn't give a rat's ass about your job. They're just tossing boards into
No.
the truck. And it's not no fault of theirs. They're just loading boards onto the truck. So that makes your job on the job way more difficult because now you have boards that are twisted, boards that are bent, and you either have to discard those and take them back, or if you're like me, I'll just straighten them as I go. But that takes extra time. The other way to select framing lumber is to just pick
Go
it
there.
out.
Yeah.
Go to the store and pick it out.
Put on some gloves. Or if you're worried about getting splinters, most carpenters that have worked, I have alligator skin. I can stick
Yeah,
my
I
hand
don't wear gloves that
into
much.
a bucket full of screws and they won't even.
Where, it's good if your hands are not rough. It's good to wear gloves when you're selecting framing.
Because you're
lumber.
like as you're pulling and everything, you're gonna get got.
There are a lot of
it's a good
splinters.
idea.
But yeah, the best thing to do is if I
Go
had
to
a
the
job
store.
last week
Yeah.
where I needed 62 boards,
Right.
62 2x3s, and it took me probably a half an hour, I think, to select 62 2x3s. But every single board that I picked, once I got them on the job, they were all nice and straight. Yeah, that's
Like
it. You
this.
just look down them, and
Look down. You see, like, oh man, like.
there
if
we
you-
go. This is
and then
back to
flip
it.
it over, and then that's a good one.
This is back to an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You take a little time ahead of time. Now I know that all the stuff that I'm using on the job is
Yeah.
good for me.
And if you want to get crazy,
Good for me, good for you.
if you want to get crazy, you start recognizing the grain patterns in the boards,
Yeah,
and you can look at a board before you even look down and say this one's going to be straight.
yeah,
And it's straight because you know how it's been cut.
yeah. And you can toss the ones that have a ton
You
of
can
knots
see,
in them.
or you can see it's been like it's the last piece of the. Yeah. So, yeah.
So there
Select
we go.
your
Lumber.
lumber.
Selection.
And then we're at installation, like nails or screws. Would you rather use nails or screws?
I use screws for my smaller projects.
Yep, I do too.
Just because part of it's laziness and part of it is engineering.
Screws have a
If I'm doing like a small couple of walls in a kitchen,
yeah.
I want it to be nice and accurate, but also like I don't feel like bringing my compressor and a hose and a framing gun
Right.
for like just this small little bit. Like to me, I already have my screw gun and my drill and my driver there.
I think it comes down to production. If you're framing all day and putting up wall after wall after wall after wall and decks nails all day long.
Yeah.
You got clips, you're throwing them in a gun, you're shooting all day long, you're shooting nails. If you're doing something that's a smaller project, you put up 2 or 3 walls, you're doing some cabinets later or a little bathroom.
Yep.
Screws are fine. And screws are very strong and you can take them out.
Well, I'll give you a great example.
If you mess up.
I'll give you a great example of why you
never
want
mess
to
up,
use screws for smaller things. Medicine cabinets. Sunken medicine cabinets.
Yeah.
All right? You got a medicine cabinet that's going into an older bathroom, right? And you need to make a hole in the wall so that the new medicine cabinet can now recess back into the wall. Well, you don't need to just cut a hole. You have to put new framing lumber around it.
Yep.
So that you have something to screw it into and it's got support. If you were to use nails, a lot of times those boards, when you go to put them in, they're going to bump over or bump here.
Yeah.
And then here's the most important thing. What if you're off? If you're off on a small project like that and you've got to take out a board that's nailed in, it's just more difficult to move the board.
If you're going to call yourself a finished carpenter and you keep getting your saws out, something's wrong.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Now,
I just did a video on toe screwing.
That's right.
Toe screwing is when you're drilling at an angle into a board so that when a board meets a board, the screw comes in at an angle.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very strong and effective way to join 2 perpendicular boards together. It's actually stronger than if the screw came up through the other way. But it's a fantastic method. But the nice thing is, if I screw that board in, if I screw it in, and then I want to move that board over 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch because it's not flush or even, then I can just back that screw right out, move it over, and put it back in.
Yeah.
And it's much harder to do with
a nail. If it's a nail, you got to get your cat spot. You got to get your hammer. You got to dig it out, or you got to get your sawzall out, or a carbide blade on your multi-tool or something. You got to cut it. Now the board's all marred up at the end. You got this piece of metal sticking through it. So
but if we're doing bigger projects, I do like a nail gun because it's way faster.
Yeah.
Boom,
Finished nail
done.
gun. So so I'm the same. Screws all day long, and guess what?
I think that about covers it.
I think so.
I think that about covers it.
I reckon.
So since that about covers it, it's time to listen to my phone call.
Okay.
To this contractor the other day. I'm not going to, I don't even want to set it up. I'll just tell you that this was an ad that my character was answering for a guy that was looking for painters.
Okay.
So, Jim, you let me know how close we are to queuing that up. Okay, let's listen.
Hello there. My name is Carl Lee, and I'm calling because I paint houses, and I see that you have an ad on Craigslist. Is that job still available?
Yeah, can you just text me all your information? I'm in the middle of doing some stuff right now.
Okay, I can text. What is it that you would like me to text you besides my personal information? Would you like me to text you my experience?
Yeah, just text me a little bit about yourself, and then I'll text you back with an email. You can send the COI, and then we'll do an interview.
Okay. I just feel a little bit strange.
I just want to pause it. I forgot to tell you.
Oh.
I called this guy on a Saturday.
Okay, this is Saturday.
It's a Saturday.
Well, he's in the middle of doing some stuff.
Yeah. Anyway,
already.
Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Okay.
When I tell people I paint houses now, ever since that movie The Irishman came out, you know? Did you see that movie?
I don't know. No. No, I'm in the middle of driving right now, so I'm not going to be much attendance.
Well, if you haven't seen the movie, it's got Robert De Niro in it, and the code phrase "I paint houses" means that I'm a mafia person and I kill people. So nowadays, whenever I tell somebody that I paint houses, I'm always worried that they've seen that movie and they think that I'm representing myself as some sort of hitman or something like that. But I do have a lot of experience. Over 25 years, I can work by myself or I can run a crew. But I have to tell you, if I run a crew of people, a little bit of a taskmaster. I like to get the most out of my men, but I'm not sure what you're looking for. Are you looking for people that know how to run a crew, or are you just looking for somebody that'll take orders? Because I can do either.
Well, I mean, I just need you to text everything over and we can have an interview and I can go over some more details. I'm not in my office right now. It's Saturday. We're not open right now. But if you text everything over to me, then...
I just figured since you were driving, we could chat for just a couple minutes so I could tell you.
I'm trying to tell you that I can't chat because when I'm driving, I don't like to talk on the phone too much, but I always answer. So if you text me all your information, I'll text you back what the next steps are to get an interview with me.
Okay. Now, do you do all of your work? I see you have a Pittsburgh number. Is everything in the Pittsburgh area?
I got to go, sir.
Okay.
So... What do you think?
That was good.
It was all right.
I liked it.
It was quicker than the first one.
But he was annoyed by the end. He's just, I got to go.
I learned this week that if I'm going to do these prank calls, I need to do them during the week because
it's hard to get people.
It's hard to get people on the phone on Saturday. But once I did get this guy on the phone, man, he really wanted to get off the phone.
Yeah, those simple questions. You know, where's the work? And
I'm trying to.
I mean, dude, you killed me with the I paint houses thing. You literally
have you seen The Irishman?
I haven't seen it. I now have to go watch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He hadn't seen it either.
That won a whole bunch of awards, right?
Yeah. Well, the name of the book that the movie is based on a book. Okay. And the name of the book is I Paint Houses.
Oh.
And back in the day, I don't know if they even still use it, but back in the day, in the circle of mafia and unions that were run by the mafia,
that was the key.
If somebody said, "I hear you paint houses," and you say, "Yeah, I paint houses," that means, I can whack a guy for you. Yep.
Wow.
And Robert De Niro's character is like a hit.
Yeah. Okay. I got to go watch it now. I love mafia movies.
Yeah, and I actually worked in Local 98 with a guy who knew
how to paint
character. Knew the character that Robert De Niro's character
knew the guy.
Knew the guy. Like his mom was friends.
Isn't that crazy?
He was like kind of an uncle to this guy's mom. So he used to come to their house once every couple years and come by and check on his mom and stuff. And he used to long before this movie came out. He's like, "You got to read this book. You know, my mom's uncle. It was called I Paint Houses and stuff. And this is a guy that knew Jimmy Hoffa, and he actually killed Jimmy Hoffa." And I was like, "What?" And we all thought he was full of shit.
Right.
And then the movie comes out, and we were like, "Holy cow! He wasn't.
It was real.
He meant it.
Yeah.
He wasn't kidding."
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, my goal with these prank calls is I want to get more annoying.
Yeah.
And
I thought that was hilarious.
People more, but I'm too nice.
That's a good laugh.
Yeah.
That's a good laugh.
That's a good laugh. We did a lot of learning.
Yeah, that's a good laugh.
Maybe not as much laughing today.
Choke the chicken in front of you.
That was in one of my videos. I think that about wraps it up for today. I don't know if you want to join me in saying, Andon, thank you very much for letting us bring a whole lot of experience and a little bit of humor onto your job site.